Hi again then guys, and welcome to, of course, another breakdown of an individual car from the 1.29 patch in GT Sport, and this time, this is a great car. And I must admit, it's actually one which, for whatever reason, maybe the fact that there are less cars might have something to do with it, I actually like the way this car handles and the way it performs a lot more now in GT Sport than I ever did in the past of the franchise, because this is a car which I never used. In fact, most of the Super GT cars weren't among my absolute favourites. I tend to prefer stuff like GT3s or GT1s, but this was always a great one. And of course the stealth models in particular would always get a ton of love, the base models too, like the Honda HSV10. This one, though, was pretty much always the king. And of course we broke down all of the Super GT cars, all 50 whatever of them there are, in Gran Turismo 6 and also the past of the franchise before in this same series. And if you want to see all the previous episodes, you can click through at the end of this video. But this is, as such, a returning face. And of course we already had 3 Super GT cars which were never featured before debut months and months ago. The GT-R, the newer one that is, the newer NSX, and the Lexus. Now, once again, we have Honda, Toyota, or Honda Lexus I should say, and Nissan coming back again, but with, not too surprisingly, the slightly older models. Now, I prefer the Lexus SC430 over the existing one. I find it's just a more interesting car to look at, to drive, even though, of course, it's not as quick. The NSX, I think actually I also prefer, to be honest. It's certainly not as sharp, anywhere near as sharp in fact. But what about a GT-R? Because the new GT-R is arguably closer to this one than the other 2 respective cars are to their predecessors. So in other words, the newer Lexus is very different to the SC430, and the new NSX is worlds apart from the older one. This, though, it's similar. They're both R35 derived, and of course, although the specs are very different, they're still based on the same DNA. So how different could they really be, and how different could the performance really be, especially given how dominant this car already was in GT6? Well, as it turns out, they're very different, because for one thing, I like this car more. Now, the newer GT500 Nissan, which we already had, is undoubtedly a quicker car. In fact, all 3 of them are quicker than the new 3 Super GT models that came in this pack. That's no surprise at all. I mean, if it was any other way, you would kind of be worried about the accuracy of the game, because they shouldn't be quicker. Even if they have more power, they should not be quicker, because newer tech, newer aero, of course the newer machine should be quicker, just like a new school formula car taking on an old one. Even if the old one sometimes may have more power, it still doesn't make much of a difference. It's all about that cornering ability. Now with these, the difference is, we're not talking about the difference between a 70s Grand Prix car and a 2018 F1. This isn't that far removed. These are not that much older, and yet it's interesting to see just how quickly the technology of the sport has progressed. Again, you would hope as much. Now, I do prefer this one, as I said, over the newer GT-R for a couple of reasons. One, I prefer the look. I think the bigger, beefier body kit just looks cooler. But also on a more practical level, I prefer the handling. Now, that being said, the newer one is definitely quicker, and that leads me to pretty much the only issue that I have with this car. Because across the board, I would say this is a near perfect race car. For GT500 and just in general, it's a brilliant machine. The handling, the brakes, the grip, the acceleration, top end speed for what it is, it's great across the board, it's fantastic. However, the issue is the exact same issue that the Group C cars have in Group 1, and that is they're just not competitive enough, for the most part, against modern LMPs. They don't have the speed advantage that they would in real life because of tuning, and of course through corners they're never going to win because they're so much older. Likewise with Group 2, the exact same thing happens with these 3 cars compared to the 3 newer ones. These are all quick, the new 3, but the 3 that we already had are all quicker. By quite a lot. You're talking 3 to 4 seconds a lap, even on somewhere like Suzuka, and the lap isn't all that long at Suzuka, so that's a huge difference, at least for me personally. So that is the only issue that I see with this car, and that is that as great as it is, you have to take it only up against the NSX and the SC430. If you try to take it up against any of the new three, it doesn't stand a chance. They're just way, way quicker. Now, of course, with balance of performance, that could and possibly will all change anyway, but I'm just talking about the baseline. Now, in terms of what the car offers, of course, GT500, you've got certain regulations to adhere to, but in some ways, it might be a bit better in comparison to the others than you might think. Being a GT-R, of course, it's going to be good, but I would have expected it to be maybe a little bit more heavily penalised compared to the other two. But actually, no, it's lighter than the NSX. 50 kilos lighter, which is a huge difference, and in terms of power, it's also lower than the NSX. The NSX has over 500 horsepower, this one has 494, which is more than the Lexus, and it actually weighs the same as well as the SC430, so it's interesting, it kind of falls somewhere between the two, and falling between two cars is not a position where a GT-R would usually be. It's usually the top of the pack, so it's an interesting role reversal compared to the last game. However, it's the middle of the pack until you actually drive it. And then, as far as I'm concerned, there is no contest. The Lexus is really good, really fun, great car, I really like it. The Honda, of course, has its own challenging handling, but many people love it anyway. It's very smooth at high speed, has a great, almost supercar, kind of GT1 car vibe to it. The NSX, or the GT-R I should say, is the king. It dominates the other two, it's not even close. This thing feels much more similar to the newer ones than either of these other two debuting cars do. Now, with that in mind, this is the only one of the three which I would even remotely recommend trying to take against the new cars, and even then, of course, it depends on your opponents not being quite good enough to make full use of the newer cars, or balance of performance giving you a helping hand. With that all in mind though, it's still a great car. So just like with the Group Cs, if you keep it to stuff like the 787B, the Jag, the Mercedes and the Nissan going up against each other, you can have a fantastic battle. However, if you throw an Audi R18 or a Peugeot 908 or a Mazda LM55 into the mix, they don't stand a chance. That's just the way it is. With these, it's the exact same thing. If you keep the three going head to head, it's fantastic. If you put the new NSX or the new Lexus or the new GT-R into the mix, without balance of performance, say your prayers, because you don't stand a chance. However, if you use the tuning that I did earlier on today, you'll find this to be a fantastic car. It's already a great car out of the box anyway. So yeah, across the board I'm very happy with it, and I'm very pleasantly surprised actually by how much I like this car now. Because I'm not a huge R35 fan, I have much more respect than love for it. It's just one of those cars for me. But this one, I really like it. I would say it's probably got the best high performance handling of the pack. The Mini is probably the most friendly, but this one, objectively speaking, is insane through corners. So yeah, check it out if you haven't. It's 800,000 just like all of the others, so it's not even like you're paying more for it like you would be with a Stealth. So overall, great car, great debut in the game, or technically a return, not a debut. And that's it for this pick overall. So of course, if you want to check out my other Super GT reviews, click through here at the end, or if you want to see my tune setup for this car that I did earlier today, you can also click through here at the end. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.